Cereal has been around since the late 1800s and since then has changed a lot over the years. Gone are the days of old where cereals had to first be tenderized by soaking in milk overnight before eating, and upon us now are the days of cereal based on any kind of snack you can think of. You want Twinkies for breakfast? There's a cereal for that. You want cookies instead of a balanced meal to start your day? There's a cereal for that. You want churros or s'mores or tiny bales of hay? There's a cereal for almost anyone's taste preference when wandering the cereal aisle in America, and if you've ever encountered an American in a foreign cereal aisle, you'll quickly understand that it's not just taste preference that matters to them, but a dedicated breakfast food culture. As an American living in Australia, I find the selections here a little dull in comparison. The Fruit Loops don't look fruity enough. The Frosted Flakes aren't even named correctly, or the Rice Krispies. How can I be sure I'm getting my 25 grams of sugar per bowl when all of the options want me to not develop childhood diabetes? It's no secret that foods overly saturated in sugars, salts, and fats are what make the American diet often starkly different compared to other countries and cultures, and especially when it comes to breakfast foods. But I'm not one to lecture someone else on why having marshmallows in their cereal probably isn't a good idea. I instead want to focus on something that might give a little more insight into why Americans are so obsessed with our specific cereals and breakfast culture beyond the sugar addiction. Cereal box prizes were first introduced in the early 1900s. The Funny Jungle Land Moving Pictures book was given to customers in stores for buying 2 boxes of Kellogg's Corn Flakes. This sparked the distribution of tons of other cereal box prizes over the years, with pinback buttons, sports cards, and toys like submarines and decoder rings being among the most prominent. Other larger prizes were also available after mailing in box tops or proof of purchase to the cereal company. As these prizes were developed to incentivize the purchase of cereal and were especially marketed towards kids, the controversy surrounding them caused the popularity of cereal box prizes to slowly decrease over time. Not to mention the choking hazards and toy recalls. Not to worry though, because a bright and smiling cartoon figure was sure to still bring in the sales. While the first cereal mascot was created in 1902 with Sunny Jim, cereal mascots didn't start to gain popularity until the 60s and 70s. Now, pretty much any cereal you see will have a happy face smiling on the front of it, hopefully enticing you, or rather your kids, to buy. They're almost always anthropomorphic animals with bright colors and recognizable features. They match the theme of their supporting cereal, like Lucky the Leprechaun with Lucky Charms, or for the birds with human feather hands that have nothing to do with cereal, they can instead be tied to their cereal through their color schemes and designs. In addition to their meticulous, eye-catching, and child-friendly designs when animated, these characters also have distinguishable voices and catchphrases that make it clear what their favorite cereal is and just how desirable it is. Most commercials featuring cereal mascots involve the animated characters scheming to get their hands on the cereal, only to be typically foiled by the kids who get to eat it instead. I don't know what the psychology is behind this cereal commercial trope. I don't think I ever wanted to eat Trix cereal specifically because I didn't want the Trix rabbit to have it, but regardless, I'm sure my eyes were still glued to the TV screen whenever he was trying to get his hands on the cereal again. I remember there was this one series of Fruit Loops commercials that were episodic and left you on a cliffhanger with each part in the saga. With how TV commercials are slotted and run, I don't think anyone ever successfully saw every episode, let alone in the correct order, but similar to with the Trix advertisements, I still wanted to see how the story ended. If mascots weren't chasing after the cereal and plotting to maim children in the process, they were instead just directly telling you how great the cereal was or how it drives them cuckoo. And it didn't just stop at mascots created specifically for the cereal. Around the 80s, cereals also began to introduce recognizable characters on the front of cereal boxes, often with a themed cereal to match. Both Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles were released by Post in 1971, using characters from the cartoon The Flintstones as spokestunes, or cartoons used in advertising. By the 80s, cereals used characters like Orange Blossom from Strawberry Shortcake, the Smurfs from the show with the same name, C-3PO from Star Wars, and Barbie from the Mattel doll line. Later characters involved with the trend included SpongeBob SquarePants, the Powerpuff Girls, and even Baby Shark as late as 2019. Sometimes the characters were slapped on the box as part of a partnership with the cereal brand, but often they were given their own special cereal, usually as a limited edition shape and flavor. So if toys aren't necessarily acceptable as a way to incentivize children into wanting a certain cereal, then who's to say that lovable cartoon mascots who appear in your favorite TV shows or constantly talk about how great the cereal is are any better? Countries like Mexico and Chile have completely banned cartoon mascots on food in an attempt to combat obesity, particularly childhood obesity. Residents of other countries have also been petitioning to make similar moves, and I mean, they do have a point. If candies and chocolates that are straight processed sugar don't have mascots to reel in children, then why is it acceptable for sugary cereal brands to utilize them just because they throw in the liability claim that Cocoa Puffs are part of a complete breakfast? Meanwhile, in America, sugary cereals have been so successful that they've even branched out into other foods. Things like cereal straws, cereal bars, cereal-themed yogurt, and even milk-based drinks made to taste like the leftover cereal milk have made their way into the grocery aisles over the years. And despite the short lifespan of some of these products, they're still a bit strange in retrospect. What other country loves its cereal brands so much that they invent entirely new products based around them? With mascots on the front of the box, the back of the cereal boxes were just as, if not even more, engaging. Games like word searches, mazes, and other compelling activities were printed in colors just as bright as the mascots, often with the mascots themselves accompanying you while you played. And don't all these games and characters make you wish you could have even more fun with your cereal? What if you could be just like those kids in the commercials, exploring, eating sugary cereal, and going on a cereal adventure? Well, in 2001, the kids who dreamed of tricking the Trix Rabbit and going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in their own cereal-related escapade could now get exactly that, or at least something close to it, at Cereal Adventure, a General Mills branded cereal attraction located in the Mall of America in Minnesota. Branded as the attraction where your favorite cereals come to life and spanning 16,000 square feet over multiple stories, Cereal Adventure was a one-of-a-kind American family affair, to be sure. There were cereal mascots over 5 stories tall, giant slides shaped like spoons and Lucky Charms rainbows, customizable boxes of cereal, and plenty of cereal-themed merchandise, including plush toys and sweatshirts. There was even a Cereal Adventure cafe where you could pay for a likely overpriced bowl of cereal to complete the experience. A General Mills spokeswoman claimed they received little criticism around the attraction because everybody loves cereal. It's part of everyday life. And while the prominence of cereal culture, especially the brands and mascots, might be a little questionable, this lady had a point. Scott Kramer made an entire video dedicated to the Cereal Adventure experience and touches on more of the attractions and cereal content you could find there. His video is linked in the description if you want to hear more about it. The thing about Cereal Adventure, besides it being overly gaudy and rooted in capitalist commercialism, is that it was unique to the Mall of America location and also closed down in 2003, just under 3 years after it was initially introduced. Now, as much as I've poked fun and ridiculed big cereal, I did still grow up a naive American kid and loved my sugary cereal. I'm sure I would have had a ton of fun at Cereal Adventure, riding into the Lucky Charms marshmallow pit and eating Trix in a food court, but I didn't live anywhere near Mall of America, and by the time I was old enough to be able to beg my parents to go, Cereal Adventure had already long since closed down. Disappointing is an understatement. How could I get my iconic and thrilling cereal-based adventure experience now? Well, if I couldn't go to visit the 36-foot Trix Rabbit myself, what if somehow General Mills could bring him to me? Enter cereal-based video games. One of the first video games themed around cereal was included directly in the cereal box. It was called Chex Quest and was a CD-ROM game that was based on the engine of the game Doom. Though based is an understatement, as Chex Quest was a total conversion of the Ultimate Doom and played identically to its predecessor. The only differences were visual, as the Chex Warrior, the main playable character, wore Chex-shaped armor, the enemies called Flemoids were little green slimy things, and the HUD was also decorated with the Chex logo and Chex Warrior's face in the middle. There are a few other differences, but the game was basically a cereal-themed Doom spin-off and functioned as such. I never played Chex Quest myself, but I did play a Cap'n Crunch themed CD-ROM that was developed a few years later in 1999 and was also included in boxes of Cap'n Crunch. In Cap'n Crunch's Crunchling Adventure, the player raises a Crunchling, a strange little creature you could name and customize that lives at the center of the earth. The Crunchling can be played with in one of 3 minigames, raising its jumping, strength, and speed stats. Once the Crunchling has been taken care of through maintaining its happiness, hunger, and stats, they can then battle the main boss of the game, a thief of the precious material Crunchium. Yeah, I feel like this one's a lot weirder than Chex Quest just because of how random the premise is. When I played this as a kid, I didn't even know that there was a final boss and just liked raising my little pet because creature care games are always a good time. There were a few other games that would be included as prizes in cereal boxes, but not a ton that were directly cereal themed, and as I mentioned before, the popularity of cereal box prizes kind of tapered off as the years went on. But as the early 2000s crept into view, the demand for video games only became more apparent, and players wanted more. Crunchlings and Doom ripoffs weren't cutting it anymore. The popularity and use of the internet was increasing, with more kids spending their free time on the computer every day. So what could cereal companies do to cash in on the digital age? In 2001, the cereal brand Post would answer that question when an iconic early internet website was launched. It was called Posttopia.com and featured dozens of Flash-based games that cereal lovers could play, all centered around cereals made by Post like Honeycomb, Golden Crisp, Oreo O's, and the Pebbles cereals. By 2003, the success of the site brought on the introduction of Post tokens. Post tokens were special codes printed on the inside of most Post cereals that would offer the player things like extra lives, levels, and content for certain games. So they've reeled you in with the games and then further incentivized the purchase of their cereal through these Post token codes. And I have to say, it worked. I remember when I played the various games on Posttopia, it was at a point where Oreo O's, a Post cereal, had already been discontinued. And when I saw or played games revolving around it or mentioning it, I of course wanted nothing but to try it. The Post tokens got me too. I was partial to a Honeycomb cereal themed game called Big Mouth Life because, as we covered, I love creature care games and they're always fun, even if they look like this. There were certain features in the game that were locked behind having a Post token code though, a kind of early iteration of pay-to-win schemes and cash shop cosmetics. I remember sometimes picking out the specially marked boxes of cereal at the store when I didn't even necessarily like the cereal, just because I wanted the Post token inside. I also played games that weren't necessarily or obviously cereal themed that I assume were added to the site to give players more variety and keep them playing for longer, all while cereals like Pebbles and Waffle Crisp were subliminally messaging them from the sidelines even if they weren't playing those specific games. I imagine seeing Post garnering all of the cereal-based game success just didn't sit right with their competitors, and so in 2004, just a few years after Posttopia's launch, General Mills also stepped up to the plate with the launch of their branded website called Millsberry.com. Millsberry was different to Posttopia in a few ways. The site functioned as more of a virtual world than just a mini-game hub. A customizable character called a buddy functioned as the player's self-insert avatar in the town of Millsberry. This buddy had stats like intelligence and fitness, a wallet to carry their virtual currency Mills bucks, and a mailbox to send messages back and forth to other players. The buddy could also be fed and purchased outfits, furniture, and pets, so it obviously got a lot of points for this in my books. The buddy feature, as well as a customizable player profile, made the social element of Millsberry one of its main appeals. The profile could feature your favorite colors, hobbies, music, and other aspects of your personality. It was the cereal-based General Mills branded version of MySpace for kids in the early 2000s, and they loved it. The city of Millsberry was navigated using a city map, and from here a player could get to their favorite features like a yard sale to buy items from, a grocery store to get food or their favorite General Mills TM cereals, and the town hall. But the majority of Millsberry players likely commonly frequented the most memorable and appealing part of the site, the arcade. The games featured in the arcade were clearly linked to General Mills and their cereals in some way, with some being more apparent than others. I have to say, I don't remember playing the arcade games on Millsberry as much as I remember customizing my character and playing the less commercial, more educational games like Millsberry Gazette Editor-in-Chief. I don't know why this one was my favorite, it just was. Despite still being a very branded experience, let's not forget that this is the same company behind Cereal Adventure. I still want to give Millsberry some credit. Despite being a thinly veiled commercial ploy to raise cereal sales, the site did have some good messages for kids. The stats on the Buddy avatar, for example, could be raised by playing games that related to the stat. Rope Race, for example, a game where the player's buddy climbed ropes in a gymnasium setting, raised the fitness stat, and the glorious Editor-in-Chief game raised intelligence. Despite them being computer games and only benefiting the fitness or intelligence of a virtual character, the message they send to kids is still positive. In the town grocery store, there was a guide included to help players balance the foods they were purchasing based on the food pyramid, with an emphasis on limiting fats and sugars. Though this is a little ironic, considering the brand's cereals based on candy, cookies, and marshmallows were the most prominent options in the store. But still, a link to the My Pyramid website, an official US government website centered around the food pyramid and healthy eating choices, was within easy access in the Millsbury grocery store. There were also periodic ads with positive messages encouraging players to get outside and exercise, also apparently sponsored by or in partnership with My Pyramid. So, with healthy messages and incentive to build healthy ideals and habits, Millsbury isn't quite as negative as Postopia, but since they were both still invented for the main purpose of promoting their brands to children, I don't think either brand can really be let off the hook that easily. You thought cartoons encouraging sugary cereals were bad? Try playing your 10th Fruity Pebbles themed game in a row, or getting virtually active by snowboarding in a Reese's Puffs uniform. It's not as harmless as it seems. There have been other cereal brand related online gaming sites since Postopia and Millsbury, both of which were shut down in 2011, but none that I feel were quite as prevalent. And as for the cereals themselves, well, in America, Mascots and franchise-branded cereals are still going strong, and if we're being honest, the cereals and their sugar content have gotten even worse. Existing cereals are now adding not just new flavors, but more features like marshmallows to sweeten the deal. Post has partnered with Hostess, a popular snack cake company, to produce cereals based on some of their most popular treats like donuts, honey buns, and the infamous Twinkies, while General Mills has partnered with Girl Scouts of America to make cereals based on their popular yet elusive cookies. Fruity Pebbles still uses the Flintstones as their spokestunes, despite the show having only run for 6 years in the 60s and being most recognizable to baby boomers. I do wonder if playing these online games and being spoon-fed different cereal brands under the guise of virtual fun made my sweet tooth that much harder to get over. My sugar intake was not exactly limited as a kid, and I hate to think that while I was having fun managing a virtual newspaper, I was actually just falling right into Big Cereal's marketing venture. With all of this in mind, I don't believe that Americans can be blamed too much for their cereal-based obsessions when, looking at the history combined with the current market, it seems like it was generally unavoidable, unless you limited your access to a TV, or the internet, or malls, or cereal boxes, or any grocery store. Obviously, breakfast cereals are not the only or even main source of dietary sugars in America, and I don't think canceling these brands or cereal altogether is necessarily the way to go. I just think that maybe the presence of the 10 total corporations that dominate the world could be toned down just a little. Until that day comes, I'll continue to play my creature care games as an adult and import my favorite cereals from America when I can. Only in moderation, of course.